Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining for this conversation and publication launch with artist David Jeremiah. My name is Rob Wiesenberger. I'm the curator of contemporary projects here at the Clark. The format tonight is that we will have a discussion on stage, we'll open things up for a Q&A, and then we'll adjourn to the reading room for a reception and book signing. David's publication is available for the irresistible price of $10. I want to thank the Clark's exhibitions and publications team for all of their hard work on this project, in particular editor Kevin Bicknell and designer David Edge. This project wouldn't have been possible without the generosity of three people in particular. For her support of the exhibition, I want to thank Agnes Gund, and for their support of the publication, I want to thank Timur Galen and Linda Genereux. By way of an introduction, and a brief one, David Jeremiah is a multidisciplinary conceptual artist who lives and works in Dallas, Texas. His work is held by the Dallas Museum of Art. He is the recipient of an Artist Grant Award from the Nasher Sculpture Center, and he was the subject of a solo presentation at the Houston Museum of African American Culture. The Clark is David's first museum solo show outside Texas. It's accompanied by his first publication, and I'd ask you to join me in welcoming David Jeremiah to the stage.
Oh, hello.
Thank you for being here, David.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So we'll talk a little bit about, the lights are good, all right. We'll talk a little bit about the publication. We can look at it too in person. To orient folks, if they don't know, this is a small in scale but really far-reaching in scope presentation of your work, and specifically the series titled I Drive Thee. It appears in the Clark Center, it appears in the Manton Research Center, which is to say directly outside. And I want to really get at the kind of mythology behind this series and the maybe improbable fact that it has to do with the Lamborghini. And not sure how much this pictures of this automobile have appeared on this screen in this auditorium before, but there's a first for everything.
Right.
Can you speak to the connection here? I'm showing, of course, the logo of the Italian supercar with a charging bull. I'm showing an example of the car.
Which they just recently changed up.
Yeah?
To no avail. Yeah,
okay.
They messed all the way up.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, all right, so for the second edition of the publication, we're going to note that.
Right.
But tell us about this mythology and how it is that not just the Italian sports car, but also the tradition of the Spanish bullfight plays into your work.
So as far as Lamborghini goes, I've been infatuated with those since, like Pierre was a pup, since I was really little. Object, machine, body, however you want to classify it, they're the most aesthetically pleasing thing that I've ever seen, right? What a lot of people don't realize is that once Lamborghini got past their numerical names, they started coining them after formidable fighting bulls. Now the mythology behind that, it varies depending on who's telling the story. Some people say Ferruccio wasn't fascinated with Spanish bullfighting culture. Some people say that's cap. It was just whoever was in marketing had to come up with something cooler than like L97 or whatever. But, the thing is with me, you have this, this amazingly intentionally designed object that's specifically geared towards performance, whose essence is somewhat trapped in this realm of, ritualistic violence, because that's arguably one way that you could describe bullfighting, right? Yeah. So if there's another, perfectly designed or intentionally designed specifically for performance, body, object, thing, or whatever, whose essence is also trapped within this realm of ritualistic violence, it's the human body, seeing how we can't not treat each other the ways that we treat each other, i.e. sport or whatever. But anytime I use a Lamborghini reference or, color scheme or conceptual tie-in into, a concept. It's me trying to tether the work to humanity, but in a very ritualistically human way.
So we're looking at an example. We're looking at an example of the Spanish bullfight. As an animal rights person, this is not my favorite thing to look at, but this is core to your work. And this question of ritual.
Well, they say you have to see one in person first.
Yeah, well, they say that, but may not. This is as close as I'm going to get. But this, what sort of sociologically speaking, what is the function of that ritualized violence for you, or as you suppose? I mean, why is it that we have these rituals? Is it sort of this cleansing function? I mean, why is this an enduring, if increasingly illegal, spectacle?
Well, I don't necessarily zone in on the violent aspects of it. It may seem like I do with my subject matter, especially earlier in my practice, but I mainly focus on, what ritual is, or at least the aspect of it that I'm focusing on right now. I've had a mentor since I was younger, a gentleman by the name of Thomas Riccio. He's over the Arts and Humanities Department at UT Dallas, and ever since I've been knowing him, he's been like foie anthropology down my throat. So ritual to me, at least what resonated about it with me and still does, and what I need at this moment is, it's redemptive and kind of like healing qualities, but in the context of how ritual gets you there. So ritual is an amplifier. It heightens everything, right? So it accelerates you to where you need to be. And it's all over the place in my practice. Sometimes when I'm making a body of work, my mind would go to one of the anthropological readings that I embarked upon, where some little group somewhere, they'll set up this whole scenario to aid a family grieving the death of a loved one by propping up the body and enacting all of these dreams that person had, or they heard that they had, no matter how realistic they would have been, depending on where they were socioeconomically or whatever. But it's this whole ritual that's supposed to accelerate the grieving process to where, they can see this person embodied the way that they want it to be embodied. But also, they can see them continue to fulfill everything that it seems that they lost in this moment of death and not having the time left to get there themselves. In my practice, after every session, I ritualistically have to clean up my studio. When you came to my studio, everybody who comes to the studio, they always ask, do you work in here? Well, yeah, I do. I'm just, OCD a little bit. I don't commit to it fully, but, there's ritual all over the place. And, you just have to tap into it. But for me specifically, I like how it heightens and amplifies certain things that you're trying to process. Yeah. Because, the bullfight itself, the structure of it, it stays the same.
And that's something you've spoken to about, performance, not just performance like a high performing sports car, but performance in the sort of the staged theatrical sense, that this is a highly structured, choreographed. There are costumes, and so it is this spectacle that unfolds. And you have some background on the stage, yeah? I mean, acting is something that you know something about.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm struck because you've talked about this spectacle of violence that connects in some way to the spectacularized persecution of black men in America, of ritualized violence that we see on TV. I mean, you're talking about the bullfight. The television show Cops is in its own kind of ritualized violence that people presumably had some kind of fascination or catharsis with.
Right.
But there's also there's also the role of the bullfighter, and I'm showing here a painting that's in the Clark's collection by Mary Cassatt, that when she visited Spain in the late 19th century, she depicted this encounter, this flirtatious encounter between a woman offering refreshment to a bullfighter, and this idea of the extremely macho bullfighter who also has great social mobility. It's someone who's come from the bottom and has fought their way to the top, wearing the suit of lights, which is both very masculine and also quite frilly and sort of feminized in its own way. So there's that duality of both. But in that sense, I mean, your identification in your work, and we'll get to it. In fact, let's just get to it. Is not just with the bull; it's with the bullfighter. In a sense, there's some of each. No.
Yeah, it's bullfighter, horse, and bull. But as far as like what's depicted in the Tondo, the imagery revolves mainly around the horse and the bull, trying to illuminate this dichotomy of this certain type of masculinity, juxtapose this other certain type of masculinity. Like the bull represents the more edgy, romanticized, potentially dangerous element of black masculinity that's, often ritualistically processed either through mainstream media or, your own prejudices or actual experiences. I mean, it is what it is, but the horse represents, the more kind of user-friendly. You might catch him with a pair of, Sperry topsiders and some Abercrombie on. He doesn't make you feel like, like that type of dude. But in the context of the bullfight, I mean, the bull, he goes through the steps of the tragedy. The horse kind of goes through the steps of the parody, right?
So let's look at some of the work. So this is the series I Drive Thee, which is represented in the exhibition here at the Clark. Mm-hmm. It's an overview of the series. It's also the conclusion to the series in the sense that it's been put to rest in a kind of ritualized way in the niche in the reading room. It's actually, we'll get to that, but it's a quite dramatic end. But there have been 4 sets of 7 works, and you refer to Tondo, so it's a large round panel. It's a traditional, artistic format, 5 feet in diameter, panel, oil enamel paint with rope delineating certain forms, incised and scraped away drawing. So I'm just going to click through a couple just so folks can see them, just to get a sense of the variations on a theme, right? So in each set, this is the first set.
See, now I want them back.
Say again?
I said, now I want them back.
Okay, well, I get it. The first set, right? So they're all red. Is it too obvious to ask you why red?
No. So the first 2 sets of 7, the bulk of those were this monochromatic, brighter red. Each set of 7 had one lone colored representation. Like the first set of 7 had the lone black one. The second set of 7 had the lone yellow one. The third set of 7 had a lone orange one, but the third set of 7 transitioned over into this darker red.
And we'll get.
Yeah, right.
Let's get to that.
But yeah, the first 2 sets of 7, in the context of the bullfight, it's an obvious representation of blood being bled, but it's fresh, so it's brighter. It hasn't been hit with air long enough to turn it into a darker version of itself.
So each of these contrasting works, which are actually all represented here at the Clark through loans from private and public collections, is the black one. What does the black one represent?
Nobility. That's the bull before he even got processed through the rancher. The vetting process on whether or not he's a coward. And eventually meeting the matador before he's bled. So he's still, on the valley somewhere, chewing grass, looking at you like, what's up, bro?
Beautiful. So I've also interspersed a lone object from our collection. This is attributed to Sandro Botticelli in his studio, just to represent this time-honored format of the tondo.
Right.
And actually, in the text in the publication, I say a little more about that. But just to get onto the second set, and I'm just going to click through these just to show the kind of material variation. You've talked about working with a similar kit of parts visually, but modifying them from one set to the next. That you go from a lower relief to a higher relief, and it's as if you're pushing the formal elements further and further. How do you think about that?
In my mind, it's actional texture. At this stage in the game, shout out to the Home Depot self-checkout line. Honestly, so all of the materials I've been using, they're the same. So I've kind of been forced to turn into a materialist out of necessity, and it's still wood panel, oil-based / acrylic enamel, manila rope, spray paint, and the special latex mixture that I'll mix up. But within the concept, actional texture is me communicating these different stages of the bull or the horse's experience in this ritual of the bullfight, physically.
So there's a sense in which you're embodying not just the human view of the bullfight, but sometimes the bullseye view,
Yeah.
sometimes the horse's view. So just embodying
Yeah,
different kind
yeah.
of, yeah. So this one,
Yeah, that's from the second set. That's the lone existential tenet, if you will, from the second set. So that's cowardice. And a lot of people most people favor this one the most. And it's interesting because, I don't know, the thing about cowardice is it's subjective. Sometimes it's smart not to get in the mix. But in this particular context, that just puts the bull on the fast track to being processed like any other regular cattle, right? So they get on the fast track to the butcher's block. But there's that moment of experiencing a love and gratitude for life in that cowardice that, people who aren't quote unquote a coward, won't experience, kind of like that sigh of being alive and making it or whatever. So I thought, I don't know, this is a very interesting piece. I toggle between this one and the orange one as my personal favorite of the external ones, the lone colored ones. But yeah, now we're into the third set of 7. This is that darker, more oxidized red, communicating a blood that's been bled longer. If the first 2 set of 7s, bulls were kind of like, like I don't want to say normal bulls, but bulls that are in the mix, what's understood to be like a bull that's in a bullfight. The second set of 7 are kind of like the hood street bulls, right? So what I've been doing is I work in 3 sets of 7. I've been doing that over like the past 3 years, right? So the first 2 sets of 7, I'm kind of shaking off that new car smell. I'm getting used to it. I'm opening it up. And then by the third set of 7, it's like I'm almost trying to intentionally crash out but not die in the crash, right? So I'm definitely pushing the limits. But with the acronym paintings, I started coining the third set of 7 S7. So it's like slang, right? So now we're moving, we're flowing, we're talking that shit. And, so it jumps quite a bit forward with the actional texture and just the whole attitude of it. So I guess you could say these are like the street bulls, right?
and so yeah, there are elements projecting from the surface. There's
Right.
still this kind of drawing with rope. There are orchid blossoms, which is significance that's a whole tangent that we get into in the text in the book. But what an orchid has to do with the bull is interesting. This kind of braid coming off of it. You would refer to the orange work. So
Yeah,
yeah.
this is the lone existential tenet of the third set of seven. So in my mind, there's two conversations being had at the same time. You know, the first two sets of seven, the bulk of those are this monochromatic bright red. Third set of seven, the bulk of those is this monochromatic darker red. They're all in the same conversation, even though it is layered, right? But there's this simultaneous, more existential conversation that's dealing with bigger topics than, you know, just being black in America and stuff like that. And that's something that I personally try to toggle back and forth with because, you know, I don't want to make, I mean, I want to make myself into what I want to make myself into. And, you know, if I wake up and I'm on some angry shit, then, you know, I'll get that out. But if I wake up and I'm like, oh, nobility, cowardice, glory, and all of these things that are as big as, you know, kind of like that childlike aspiration can be, then I don't want to limit myself out of this sense of, you know, like duty or what's hot right now or what's expected of me or whatever. So I always try to build that into the art just to make sure that, you know, when I look back on it, however long I'm blessed to be here, I'm like, okay, you know, I didn't waste that opportunity. So, you know, there's this kind of like horse and bull, you know, black masculinity in this ritualistic context of obviously America or whatever, you know, that's my filter. But at the same time, these lone colors in the suite, black nobility, yellow cowardice, orange glory represent that conversation if it was elevated.
So in the last set, things get wild.
I love these.
I appreciate in the work that there are these really rigorous systems, right? You do sets after a fixed number of sets after which the series exists no more, and you do monochromes until you don't. And so there is actually there's the rule and there's the freedom, there's the play. What's happening with these?
So recently, maybe about 8 months ago, I was conceptually able to justify a fourth set of seven. And, you know, it's not like I'm going back down, you know, the checklist retroactively and enforcing a fourth set of seven into all of my bodies of work. You know, it's not like I'm trying to cash in on myself, but, you know, where it fits. So at that point in time, I was doing some study on bullfighting, and I came across this revelation about the Mura bull, which is known to be, he's kind of like, this breed is like the boogeyman in bullfighting culture, right? Extremely vicious, the perfect size, and you know the thing about bullfighting, the timing is structured because once it goes past 15 minutes, it's almost the bull is virtually impossible to kill because they're extremely smart and they were bred for war way back in the day in Africa. So they approach situations like that, right? But the Mura, that particular breed of bull could just be devastating, and it got to the point to where a lot of bullfighters refused to fight them, right? But anyway, what I had found out about the Mura, you know, if I tell you to close your eyes and picture a bull, specifically a Spanish fighting bull, more than likely it'll be black, or dark enough brown where it might as well be black. So, you know, then we could talk about misconception or preconception and stuff like that. But what I found out was that, you know, this most dangerous bull that's commonly identified as a black man, he can be Rune, he can be Dune, he can be white, he can be all of these different colors, right? So so what I did from that was I basically took representations of all of these different colors that it could be, these 6 different colors that this most dangerous bull could be, and I started mixing them into, my usual color palette. And this was, the first time I started messing around with custom colors. But anyway, I started calling it the Mura mix. So it was great because it transformed the colors that I've been using energetically. It gave each one kind of like this brood and this sinister quality, right? But that's just where the colors come from. But when it comes to I Drive Thee, you have to remember that I said that, in the first 3 sets of 7, that's blood. So that's not what color they are. That's just the blood on them. So, once we get to the 4th set of 7, it's kind of like I'm revealing to you what they really look like, right? And also, the materials, they kind of go through this de-evolution. So initially I was using manila rope to create the images, the outlines of the collarbones and the orchids in the first 3 sets of 7. But what I did with these was, first, I did a bunch of pure contour drawings based on, imagined and perceived motions of a bull dying or getting killed in the bullfight. So I closed my eyes and I did these pure contour drawings, trying to channel that energy. And from those drawings, I picked the shapes that I liked the most, and I used those as a replacement for, the more identifiable collarbone and orchid imagery. So really, these are kind of like the soul, these shapes, these weird shapes, these abstract shapes, geometrical shapes, or whatever you want to call them. They're somewhat the spirit of, the previous imagery that was more identifiable.
So speaking of spirit, each of the series has a contrasting work, black, yellow, orange. The final series, this is the contrasting work.
Yeah.
And, we have to specify this is not an error with the PowerPoint. The blurred out portion is intentional.
Right.
Tell us about this one.
Well, this is where my humor comes in. So, yeah. So this is La Anima, right? Like I said, first set of 7, nobility. Second set of 7, cowardice. Third set of 7, glory. Last set of 7, La Anima, spirit, right? Essentially, the bull soul. And no one. Well, there's only 3 people who've seen La Anima in person, right? No one is ever supposed to see it in person. And it went through this trial by fire, right? Because in bullfighting culture, they say the best matador is the son. So in my mind, in the previous 3 sets of 7, the bull is being processed by man, right? In the last set of 7, dealing with the bull's spirit, the best matador gets to process that. So the sun and, the leap from sun to fire is pretty easy, right? So he has his trial by fire. And then on top of that, after its body has went through this trial by fire, I had it cremated, in a legitimate cremation retort. And the ashes were put into these custom urns, right? So the way it breaks down is, let's say if you're a collector and you acquire La Anima, right, additional or whatever, you get an urn, you get a copy of the video, it's trial by fire, you get a specific, a specific buddy pick, and then, which is on you guys' left, and then you get a copy of this intentionally crappy, shout out to those really cheap Walmart portraits that you could get back in the 90s, right? But you get these pictures unpixelated because that makes you family, right? Sometimes when people die, they have a big family, they turn their ashes into keepsakes, so everybody gets one. But, just regular people don't just get to see these pictures. But apparently, La Anima was so important that, his corpse just has to be in a museum, so the family didn't want to get in the way of that. Well, all right, we'll pixelate them, you can show them or whatever, but that's the idea behind that.
And so this is one of the urns. This is one of the urns that you designed based on the steering wheel of a specific Lambo.
Yeah, all of the configurations on all of the iDrive these are based off of specific Lamborghini model steering wheels.
So just to keep us moving and look at some of your other work, because you really have a vast body of work produced in a really small amount of time. I want to look at some other pieces. The next one is a use of rope that appears in the tondos in a different capacity, and I want to say before showing it that it's actually refers to the practice of lynching. So this is in its abstract form, but is an upsetting image. I want to say that in advance. But this is the series Superman.
Yeah.
Can you tell us the kind of mythology? I mean, I think I show it, not lightly, but the feature of your work to combine incredibly upsetting histories with a kind of unexpected kind of gallows humor is something that's a trait of your work. Can you talk about the mythology behind this piece and the kind of story that you're telling with it?
Yeah, so Superman is a play on, Superman, the comic book Superman. The thing about the comic book Superman, first off, he's an alien, right? And, not that he was a chump on his home planet, he was of noble birth or whatever, but, dude couldn't jump all over buildings and all that shit. No, not on Krypton. So it was his contact with our atmosphere, Earth's atmosphere, that gave him these superhuman abilities. So, a large part of my practice is redefining, finding nuance, and humanizing, and humanizing, things that aren't human, because we put so much energy outside of ourselves that towards things that aren't human, like they might as well be human. You know what I'm saying? Certain things or certain concepts. Like what if the N-word was walking around as a humanoid version of itself? Like, how would you treat it? Would it just be a word then? So same thing with Manila Rope, right? So in this narrative, Manila Rope is an alien species, but it has a spaceship crash. And once it comes into contact with our atmosphere, it basically does the reverse of what our atmosphere did to the comic book Superman, and it turns it into an inanimate object. And from this vulnerable state, it's framed, coerced, and misused into committing all of these atrocities against black people. Fast forward, I guess their version of the feds or whatever investigates the crash. They're down in their suits and stuff like that, and they see, this being from their civilization committing these crimes that are against their code of conduct, and it doesn't matter that they're literally left defenseless by the atmosphere of this foreign planet. They still have to be punished. They have to be punished. There's no way around that shit. You have to be punished, right? So, of course, with that mindset and that approach to correcting or educating, it becomes really paradoxical. So, he's punished in the most paradoxical way possible.
And specifically the absurdism of punishing the rope as a commentary
Yeah.
on the
with
miscarriages of justice.
Yeah, with more rope, right?
This series here, you're back to panels. I want to show a couple of them, and you can kind of maybe speak to what's going on here.
Yeah, this is the acronym paintings. This is when I coined S7 into the practice, right? So the acronyms, they housed this this dark, antagonistic, quote unquote, racist sentiment from a certain black person towards a certain white person, right? And you would never know what it meant, right? So it turned into this this perpetual guessing game. And what I envisioned, the joke to me, what I thought would be funny was, let's say a rich collector, preferably white, has, this, they're diptychs, They have this David Jeremiah acronym diptych, and there's a party going on, and they call everybody in to play this guessing game, and they just end up hurling all of these insults about themselves based on what they think we would say about them, right? But there's also a lot of self-awareness in this body of work because you have the externalized side where you see the configuration of the letters that represent this sentiment, in acronym form, pushing outside of, its foundation, trying to claim space on our side of itself. And then you have, if you go over to the next slide, you have the internalized vision, which is, I called it aesthetic code switching. You know what I'm saying? So it definitely reverts itself into more of this design-oriented representation of that sentiment. And all of the internalized, they're plays towards the center. So it's like imploding on itself.
And there's something, I mean, just the puzzle, the playfulness, and the intensity. I mean, there's something also about the game-likeness. I mean, there's something Duchampian about the way that you're introducing these kinds of paradoxes to puzzle over and intellectual problems that are that also have a formal dimension and that sort of retreat into abstraction. And I should say, I mean, you've called yourself a conceptual artist, which I find interesting, and it is also a way of saying, let's talk less about material, let's talk more about ideas. But I happen to think that what you're doing materially is incredibly interesting and unusual.
Thank you.
And maybe you can say a little bit, for example, with a work like this, about what it is you're doing.
Well, the conceptual side of the thing comes from, it's what comes first. And it allows me to get more bang for my buck. And to, touch on the humor aspects of it, I'm not a robot, and no, you good. Damn, what we jamming? I'm not a robot, and I do understand. I mean, personally, I'm of the opinion that a lot of the transgressive work or elements of my work, I think that's more so a testament to, just where we're at societally. I don't think I go as hard as as a Burden or, you know what I mean? Like Christopher Burden, right?
Right. Someone who literally,
right.
His art was to be physically
right.
shot with bullets.
I don't
yes.
think I go that hard. I think that, we're just where we're at, right?
Please don't.
Yeah, we're just where we're at right now. So it seems like it's more transgressive than, in my mind, there's always an opposite of a sentiment. So it makes sense that people are on some fuck the police type shit, right? And that used to be cool and acceptable. NWA was a thing, and it was hot. But now, it's like I said, it's not the art. It's more so of where we're at. But I do know that I commit, right? So even when I'm messing around with the taboo or whatever, look at the little homie. That's crazy.
David's son Dion is
that's crazy.
Riveted by the conversation and fast asleep, which is in fact
this dude is a clown.
Best case scenario, frankly.
Straight clown. That's crazy.
So can you talk about this body of work?
Yeah.
Because
But
I'm very fond of it. Sorry, please. Yeah, yeah.
no, so what I was saying about the humor is, I do commit, and I do go down very dark avenues, right, and alleyways and all of that stuff in the concept, and I construct from where I've been what you see, right. So the thing is, the humor is necessary. I just don't want to, explore these darker subjects or more intense subjects and just come back with nothing but negativity. So I need the humor for myself, and I also there's a level of competition in it with myself as well. Like if I can prove that there's humor in this, then that means that I really thought about it and it's earnest, right? So there's that. I just wanted to say that right quick. This body of work is the first of the fourth set of 7. So this is also a part of the acronyms, but this is from, you know, the first 3 sets of the acronyms was from, a certain type of black person towards, a certain type of white person. This is from, a, a fighting bull to a matador. But, if you elevate that a little bit more, it's from beast to man, which actually is still beast to beast. But, I always try to find ways to fulfill a body of work. So, the angry black man in America approach, that's easy. I tell people I've transformed from a pro-black to a black pro, right? So the thing with that is just trying to complete what can be said. So a wider conversation between beast and beast without all of the trappings of race and cars that we can get in and drive around, food that we don't have to hunt, this, that, and the third. I think the conversation is more fulfilled on this level. So what I did was, instead of using letters from the English alphabet, I took imagery from the bull's external and internal body, and I turned them into kind of like, I guess they're hieroglyphic, I guess you would say, but I had them fabricated into custom branding irons, right? So it's the same sentiment like in the previous acronyms. It was the same sentiment on every externalized, but the configurations were just different to connote tone, because you can say the same thing in different ways and it means something different. So some of them were circular, some of them were more stacked, some of them were like whatever, diagonal. But this is the same concept, is just pushed further into the realm of bullfighting. So each one of these different symbols is the same sentiment, but the fact that it's a different symbol is capturing a different tone of it, right?
It's interesting you say you refer to saying the same thing in different ways, and this idea that like we talk about national conversations, national reckonings, the cyclical discussion about race and about, you have in your work found oblique angles from which to tell these stories that are actually, I think, quite arresting and alarming and
Right.
compelling. And whether it's humor that gets it in, whether it's the form that makes it compelling,
Right.
you are telling these kinds of perennial tales, but in completely new ways, is my sense. I want to finish before we get to Q&A by looking at a completely different kind of practice of yours, which is performative, but you call it inverted performance. Is that right?
Inverted performance installation, yeah. The thing about inverted performance installation, I just get so tired of, I'm not really in the mix anymore, but when I was going out to art openings and stuff like that, you can almost hear the art on the wall screaming for your attention, right? So in my mind, y- and then okay, and you combine that with performance art, and then it's like a double whammy. Like not only are I don't know, it's just too much. Like how do you make art that is performed for, right? And given the proper amount of reverence and respect. So that's what inverted performance installations are about. You know, it's a performance piece that you bring the performance element to. Therefore, you are performing for the piece, as opposed to you watching some interpretive dance or whatever happen for you. You know, it happens to you.
So you are, in this case, putting the visitor into a kind of uncomfortable situation with a set of rules that they can respond to or not. Can you
Well,
tell us what they are in this case?
you know, if they're uncomfortable to, you know, that's subjective,
It's
right?
only art, but it is also something that,
Right.
yeah.
So this is Giorgio Avante Fold. I had this huge flag, official American flag, double-sided. One side is the traditional red, white, and blue. The other side is various tones and materials of black. Some of those authentic and inauthentic Lamborghini floor mats for the stars. And I created this ritualistic powder because in some cultures, you know, there's this mixture of like grain and bone and stuff like that that they'll use in rituals to kind of like demarcate zones of the ritual where spirits can't cross over and stuff like that. But mine was a 24 case of chicken flavored ramen and one pig skull that I powderized and a shitload of chalk. And you know, over the progression of the show, people walked in, tracked the ritualistic powder onto the black side of the flag, and in essence, whitewashed it, right? And it was recorded up to, I don't remember the exact time, but at that time, I had read somewhere that you know African Americans were only like 13 or 14 something percent of the country. So people could come in and record, take pictures or whatever up until a certain date, because once we got past that date, it needed the transformation that continued needed to be unseen to represent you know these instances of prejudice or whatever that happens to black people that we don't hear about, right? You know that happens away from election season or whatever.
So, so I thought we might open it up. I think there might be some mics in case there are questions. If there aren't, I certainly have more, but we can maybe raise the lights a little and see if there are any questions. I should say that this is the publication here that whose design mimics that of a 1962 Clark publication documenting a 14th century Sienese altarpiece and speaks a little bit to the devotional quality of some of these objects. They're kind of compelling force, but there's a text by David. I have a text. There's documentation. Are there questions?
Hey.
Let's wait for a mic, potentially.
Hey, thank you both so much. This is, yeah, I'm really fascinated by your work. I just have a small question. I'm wondering how you think about symmetry. It seems like something that appears in the tondos and then in the later acronym paintings, and I want to know how you came to it and how you're thinking about it. Also because, right, in your sets of 7, right, you have like, the way they kind of hit me is it's, you know, there's 6 and then there's 1 separate that's kind of a hinge for the others, so there's a symmetry even in the sets. So how are you thinking about symmetry, and how is it fitting into these like broader kind of mythologies that you're drawing from?
Well, with the Tondos, that y-axis is undefeated. It just cuts it right down the middle. So, especially with the last suite of 7, the polychromatic ones, I've had people come by the studio. Do you see the eagle? And was that intentional? Were you trying to come across as Native American? No, I wasn't. That was the y-axis. But I'll tell you this about 7. I remember my grandmother who raised me. She would always go on and on about how 7 was the Lord's number. And as much as I deny it, there's a lot of religious undertones energetically in my art, like that whole fire and brimstone type stuff, right? I mean, glory. I mean, come on, man. So that's the personal side of that. And I think that's really just my flow. The first set of 7, that's usually how long it takes me to, okay, this is what I want it to be, right? Second set of 7, it's just, I don't know, it's just, there's something that clicks. There's something that clicks like around 4 or 5 that I want just 2 more of, right? And now I'm speeding. Then the third set of 7, I'm feeling myself, and it's just, whatever. But if I would have went past 7 and made 8 or 9, I would have fucked it up, right? Like for real. So I don't know if that answers your question. I think you said something about composition.
Yeah, I'm wondering about, like, you talk about the y-axis, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just so struck by, like, the tondos you had up here and how symmetrical they are. And yeah, I'm wondering, like, how you were thinking about symmetry when you're composing them.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. I do commit to a game of I dare myself to intentionally, make something off kilter or, stagger something. But like I said, I always say I'm somewhat OCD. I always downplay it, but I think that I'm more OCD than I'll admit. And me sitting here right now, I'm finally realizing that because in my mind, I do kind of sabotage the composition, but if it's not evident and it's still somewhat being compositionally sound, I guess I'm not actually doing it. So I don't know about that.
Are there other questions? See one over here. Oh, just wait for the mic if you don't mind. Great, thank you.
Hi,
Hey.
thanks. So for me, I'll call it the bull in the room was the matador, right? So a little bit about bullfights where typically you'd have the bull kill the horse, then the matador goes one-on-one with the bull and typically kills the bull. Sometimes the bull gets away. But I'm just wondering, is the matador the observer, or is he the driver of the car? How do you think of the matador in your tondos?
Yeah, exactly. So, if you just reach your hands out, if you could, you can steer the work wherever you want to. So, positionally, you could say that the viewer embodies the matador.
Is that a race thing also? Should we assume the
No,
matador? Okay.
no, not in my mind. Not in my mind. The whole the the foundation of black masculinity is accessible, right? Because that's what I'm embodying right now. But I definitely try to explore as much as I can, not necessarily with that, but for that. Because I do think that that's something that needs to be redefined, not necessarily because it's bad, but there are negative elements of it. But I'm trying to discover nuance and humanize and redefine, not from a place of necessarily judgment, but exploration. Because one thing that you said, at this point, I think we're beholden to have conversation in new ways, since it seems like we're just determined to have the same conversation. So there's really no judgment on my end. You know, if me and you were sitting down having a personal one-on-one, then, you know, I would let you know how I feel about certain aspects of race and stuff like that, honestly, and you know, personally. But when it comes to the work, I really want the subject matter to be as big as it can, not for me, but for it, right? So I know I kind of went roundabout your question, but the Matador is definitely on the outside of these. The two components that we're focusing on are the horse and the bull in this process of being steered by the Matador, right?
And you've talked about that title, I Drive Thee, as being
Right.
Both an assertion and a retort in a
Right.
dialogue between bull and human.
Right.
And so drive is a question of who is
Right.
driven in terms of motivation and who drives in terms of agency, right?
Right.
To be in the driver's seat or to be driven.
Right.
And I would submit that you are both in terms of kind of the way you approach your work and how prolific you've been in recent years. Are there other questions before we adjourn to a reception? Not to rush anyone, but please, yeah.
Thank you. Hi, thank you for that. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about writing in your practice, and if with each body of work there is usually a written component to it. If so, if you could say more about that, and if not, what is it about this body of work that inspired the publication?
Well, the Bull acronyms was the first time I sat down in earnest and put together a in-depth text on a body of work. There's writings scattered all over the place, you know, either on paper or in, you know, notes on my phone or whatever. What I'm actually working on right now is a omnibus, I guess you could say, which will have in-depth writings on every body of work since conception of the practice until 2024, and you know, like bits and pieces of script, dialogue, short stories, poems, and stuff like that. But the writing it's more for the work, because, I mean, yeah, this is my first time talking in front of an audience like this, so there might be a little bit of jitters, or I didn't speak as compellingly as I can one-on-one in the studio, but, you know, I'm pretty good at talking about the work as far as, you know, in a giving sense, you know, and everything really is a commitment to the work. So there's not too much about it that I can't answer. So if we're talking about my work, then you'll get an earful. But the work is going to be here longer than I am. So I really started writing about it for it. So not to get in the way of how it affects people, but, you know, this is what this means. You know, so if you're ever wondering what David Jeremiah meant by making this body of work, this is what this means. And the work deserves it. I mean, not just mine, but, you know, just serious work, serious art. It deserves as much as you can give back to it, right? Because it gives you a lot. So, you know, if I'm gonna sit up here and beat on my chest about being, you know, a serious artist, or hopefully one day an important artist, you know, I need to give back to the work and write about it, you know? And now, as far as my writing style, you know, it's all over the place. I try to have just as much fun making the work. I mean, as I do making the work when I write. So, you know, the styles and the tones, they jump around, but yeah.
David, thank you so much.
No, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
There's a reception just outside.